The Met Police's handling of a pro-Palestinian march in London has led to calls for the Commissioner to resign after exchanges between Gideon Falter and officers policing the protest came to light on social media. The Prime Minister's called for the police chief to rebuild trust amongst the Jewish community after a heavily edited video came to light showing one police officer threatening to arrest Mr Falter for breaching the peace and describing him as openly Jewish. But as clumsy and offensive as his choice of words may be, not everything is as it seems.
He says that is not the case at all. What he was doing was, which he's perfectly entitled to do, he'd been to the synagogue and then he wanted to go for a stroll and he was prevented from doing that because he's Jewish.
Well, I think the entire video of the incident is now available online. I think people should watch it. But I think people need also to be aware of who Mr. Falter is and the organisation he represents. They're a deeply controversial organisation. They were highly criticised shortly after they were set up by a parliamentary inquiry into anti-Semitism. They were criticised on the basis that they were deliberately conflating anti-Semitism with legitimate criticism of the actions of the Israeli state. They've also been heavily criticised for a stream of Islamophobic comments, including smears against the Mayor of London, and for using anti-Palestinian racist rhetoric. Since the marches have begun, the organisation have tried to stop them. They've even called for the army to be brought onto the streets to stop the marches happening. Now they're using the tactic of coming to the marches, trying to provoke an incident so that they can say there are scenes of disorder and therefore the marches cannot go ahead. These are disgraceful antics. They should be shunned by anybody who believes in the right to protest and democratic freedoms. Let me say, first of all, the police officer in the video was entirely wrong to say that Mr. Falter being visibly Jewish would be a provocation. That's actually a smear against people marching. The reality is that at every demonstration there are many hundreds of Jewish people joining us, many in an organised Jewish bloc declaring themselves to be Jewish. Their presence is always warmly welcome. But the nature of the incident was not as Mr. Falter has tried to portray it. He suggested he was innocently going for a walk, came across the march and was asked to leave because he was openly Jewish. The reality was he came to the march with an entourage of 4 to 5 people and a film crew, sought to break through the stewards, physically pushes himself past the police in order to walk in front of the march to provoke and to try to stop it. He was trying to provoke a confrontation. That's what happened.
Well, openly Jewish is not acceptable, but I have, Sally, watched the 13.5-minute clip that's on Sky News. And it's a totally different encounter to the one that Mr. Falter has reported. What you see him doing is attempting to go against the march, or trying to push past the officers. And I think for 13 minutes, the officers showed great restraint. They offered to take him to a crossing point. They offered to help him and the group he was with, who were filming, the opportunity to cross at a more appropriate place. So the narrative that's been pushed for the last few days is not accurate. And I think what you see is the police officers acting with great restraint. But personally, if I was policing that march, I would have been inclined to have arrested him for assault on the police officer and a breach of the peace. So I think with all of these stories, it's really, really important that we don't just accept things at face value. And I have, over the weekend, been asking to see the full footage. And when the full footage was revealed, you have a very, very different account to what Mr. Falter originally said had happened.
Speaking to the London Economic, a former Met police officer who was at the event suggested that there could be a clear agenda in play here which involves banning all pro-Palestinian marches. The Commissioner has suggested that the criteria for such a ban is the anticipation of a really serious disorder, such as the life-threatening risk on display during the anti-cuts protest in London in 2011. But as Chris Hobbs puts it, on a disorder scale between 1 and 10, these pro-Palestinian protests barely register a 2.